I don't have words to describe what we saw, but I'll try. Two large, orange-colored, transparent orbs floating in the air, just these two large, colored orbs floating above our heads.
Everybody is afraid of talking about the events in their lives that have actually been the most important because no one wants to think they're crazy.
It was about the size of a basketball and shone with a hazy red glow. It drifted gracefully over our heads.
It was a sphere. It had a color of white and orange and green. It was swirling colors. I saw it crystal clear. And then...
This is the story of my encounter with a UFO, a story I have rarely shared in my life, one that I always thought was best kept personal. But now, many moons later, I know this story isn't unique to me. I know I'm not the only one who has encountered the orbs. It takes place during my first and only semester of college. I was living on campus on the 8th or 9th floor in a dorm room with a beautiful view of the city. I was isolated and alone. I had stopped going to class a few weeks prior, overwhelmed by the sea of strangers and the weight of the expectations on me. I was either going to drop out or be kicked out. I had turned to drugs, looking for an escape from the pressure and the shame of failure. I was more interested in exploring my own consciousness than I was in whatever I was learning in class. I naively thought if I could just get high enough, maybe all this chaos would make sense. On this particular night, however, I had mostly sobered up, besides a bowl of weed every few hours to keep me at my baseline. When I ran out of weed, I would smoke stems or scrape the resin from the sides of my pipe. It was around 10 or 11 o'clock, and I was on my laptop, headphones on, music blasting, when suddenly I had the urge to take off my headphones and look out the window. I turned my head just in time to see a glowing orb enter my view from the right of the open window. It was about the size of a basketball. I couldn't make out any features, only the light coming off of it, an amber and green light that had the quality of a mercury vapor or fluorescent light source. I stared in wonder. It was mesmerizing. As it drifted into the middle of my field of view, I became convinced that it was conscious, that it was trying to communicate with me. After all, it had stopped in front of my window. The presence I felt from the orb was benevolent. I felt no fear. I was calm but lucid. My brain was working overtime, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It floated weightlessly. It made no sound. It emitted a dazzling light, and it seemed to be trying to communicate with me. Why me? I surrendered to the pull of the orb and gazed into its dazzling white core. I basked in the mystery of the moment, laughing internally at the impossibility of what I was witnessing. I'm not sure how long that moment lasted. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute. But eventually, the orb began to pull away. Its attention was no longer on me, and it continued on its path. As I watched it float away, I asked myself if what I was seeing was real, or if I was dreaming. Either way, I was lucid. I felt a deep disappointment as the orb disappeared around the edge of the building and out of sight. The entire time, my phone had been on my desk next to me, and not once had I thought to take a photo. The opportunity was now gone. With no evidence, over the years, I would begin to doubt my own experience. Was it something mundane? Was it a hallucination? I would push the experience out of my mind for years, categorizing it under M for mystery, along with the other inexplicable experiences from that time in my life, chalking it up to drugs. But it wasn't until a few months ago that I once again had a fleeting encounter with an orb, this time completely sober. It was a cozy, stormy night in my suburban neighborhood. There was thunder, lightning, light rain, and heavy winds. Around midnight, the power went out. I walked over to the window to appreciate the neighborhood without the usual lights, something I love to do during power outages. I looked out at the dark, peaceful neighborhood, but one light caught my attention. An amber orb, once again about the size of a basketball, floating up from behind a row of houses about a block away. I quickly opened the window to listen for any sound it might be emitting. Only the sound of rustling trees and rain. It moved slowly in a straight line towards my house. Once again, my brain ran through all the possible explanations of what I was seeing. and came up blank. And once again, as quickly as it had arrived, it drifted out of sight above my house. Okay, so that's my experience. What are these things? Because I'm not the only one who's encountered them before. So, in spite of the orbs being the most common type of UFO, there is not a lot of information about them and what they are. And people's experiences are hard to come by. Now, the interesting thing from my research is that there's a lot of similarity between the different accounts that people have of encountering these orbs. One thing is that they're usually about the size of a basketball. Another is that the light emanating from them is usually amber and or green. And another is that they often appear during thunderstorms or power outages. So one potentially related phenomenon is this phenomenon of ball lightning. Let's take a look at the Wikipedia page. Ball lightning is a rare and unexplained phenomenon described as luminescent spherical objects that vary from pea-sized to several meters in diameter. Though usually associated with thunderstorms, the observed phenomenon is reported to last considerably longer than the split-second flash of a lightning bolt, and it is distinct from St. Elmo's fire and will-o'-the-wisp, which are other strange electrical phenomenon. So there is a theory that ball lightning explains the phenomenon of the orb UFOs, and it seems as good of a theory as any. The thing is, no theory, mundane or incredible, really explains all of these phenomena in any way that is satisfactory. You can see that there's been science done about this. There's been a lot of different theories and hypotheses. There's about 10 different ones, and all of them go way above my head and are completely filled with technical jargon and scientific gobbledygook. So I don't know if you can really put any stock into any one of these without being a scientist or something, which just deepens the mystery. I mean, the fact that this is such a strange phenomenon that scientists cannot agree on what's causing it and come up with these far-flung theories. I think to me that indicates that there's a real mystery there. On the topic of ball lightning is a great book called Ball Lightning. It's about a scientist whose parents are killed by ball lightning and who dedicates his life to discovering the secrets and unlocking the mystery of ball lightning. I recommend it. It's good. Now, of course, there's also a connection between psychedelics and the psychedelic experience and the UFO phenomenon as well, which would lean more towards it being less of a scientific phenomenon and more of a psychological phenomenon. I think it's interesting that there's these theories that contradict each other, but that also describe the same phenomenon. So, for example, the first experience might have been more of a psychological phenomenon. The second experience had happened during a thunderstorm, during a power outage, which is a common reoccurring theme. So that maybe points to a scientific explanation. I'm not sure. Are these two separate phenomenon that we're talking about, or are they the same thing? Is there some overlap between all of these different orb sightings and the different circumstances that they happen within? Some of them seem to be more mundane, like the second experience that I had, and some of them seem to be almost spiritual or paranormal, like the first experience that I had. So I'm not sure if there's any commonality there at all. And that's one of the things that makes this such an incredible mystery, is that nobody has a satisfactory explanation for either the phenomenon of ball lightning or orb UFOs or any of that. So there's a lot more discussion about the flying saucers and the different other shapes of UFOs because they're more tangible, and I think they come from, those archetypes come directly from Hollywood. But the orbs seem to be something even stranger and even more mysterious, but even more ubiquitous in that they're the most common sighting. So I'm not sure what this phenomenon is. It's one of those things that in my life it's just an open loop that I cannot close. I don't know how to make sense of my experiences. Researching is not really that insightful. It only leads to more questions. So that's my experience. This is something that seems to happen in my life maybe once every 10 years. Something this crazy happens to me. So I know many other people have experienced them, so let me know down in the comments below if you have encountered the orbs. Tell me your story. I want to know. I want to collect as much information about this phenomenon as possible so that we can come to a conclusion about what these things could potentially be. All right, that's it.